achieved.
So there are rumors floating around that a UFC supercard, UFC 227, is in the works. And the possibility of Alexander Gastelum versus Luke Rockhold, that's an interesting fight, definitely relevant. Obviously, we know the UFC would like to see Gastelum get another opportunity at the title. Rockhold said he's done with middleweight. He's moving up to light heavyweight. It's a relevant fight. I like that. But the other big rumored fight is Nate Diaz versus George St. Pierre at possibly a lightweight. Now, there's conflicting reports as to whether this is going to happen or not. And I love seeing George St. Pierre fight. I've become a bigger fan of Nate Diaz over the last couple of years, but quite honestly, that fight does nothing for me. Why? As a main event? No, I want to see the main event be fights that are taking the winner somewhere else, whether it be a champion to win a championship or fight for a championship, or just, I just don't like that fight. And quite honestly, if the weight cut goes well for George, I think he's just too big for Nate. And his style, just his wrestling, his top game will just wear Nate Diaz out. I don't think it's a great matchup. It's not a matchup I'm excited about. A lot of people, there's a lot of things. I'd rather see Nick Diaz versus George St. Pierre rematch, and even then, that's not a huge, awesome fight for me. But I'm all about the sport aspect of it. And while I do enjoy the spectacle, I want it to be a secondary aspect of the entertainment. I want to see fights that progress fighters' careers, not just fights where guys are, hey, I want a paycheck, I want a big fight, I want a big money fight, that's all I want. I want to see Nate Diaz, if he wants a big money fight, earn it. Come back, win a fight or two, and get a shot at the title. Don't sit and wait till they give you that out of desperation. It's exhausting. There are guys who fight, like look at Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar's just been told, as far as I know, he will be getting an opportunity to fight for the title next. Whoever comes out of Ortega versus Holloway. That's the way it should be. He lost his title shot when he could have just walked away from the fight against Ortega. He went and he beat Cub Swanson. He could have easily said, no, I still want my shot at the title, forget it. And he still went and fought Cub, and now he's getting a shot at an opportunity at the title. I think that's a good way to do it, and I'm happy the UFC is doing it like that. I'll still watch George versus Nate if it does transpire, but, it's not a fight I'm going to, get super excited for. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC 224 event, which will take place on May 12th in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Now, this fight for a lot of people is being overlooked. It's taking place in Brazil, so it's featuring a lot of Brazilian content, and a lot of people feel it's being overlooked with some other big pay-per-views on the horizon. Obviously, the main event's a big fight, Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington. Looking forward to that. And there's some other good matchups. We get to see Mackenzie Dern back in action. Jacare against Kelvin Gastelum's an interesting fight. Always like to see John Lineker in action. And, of course, Lyoto, Machida, Vitor, Belfort is a kind of almost like a Legends bout. And Belfort is possibly his final fight in the UFC. I'm coming off an event where I went 7-4 overall, which, hey, it's not amazing, but it was solid. More importantly, my my bet packs had a good payout. My big reward parlay, 114.67 units won. My big bankroll parlay, 50.59 units won. So both made sizable profit right back in the winning, right back in the kick-ass category. Again, all my gold plays cashed. I had some huge gold plays come through, and that always helps out when it does. My bet packs will be available for $15. It's subscription turnover time, so you'll be able to subscribe for, what are we looking at, May and June. And usually you can save between $20 and $30. The earlier you get in the subscriptions, the more money you can save. So make sure you check that out. And again, I had somebody post to me last time they lost money on my Barboza pick. And that was unfortunate, and we kind of hashed it. I explained Barboza wasn't one of my top picks. He was a silver play. I felt he had a good chance of winning as an upset, but at the same time, he wasn't one of my top plays. Guys like Frankie Edgar, Ryan LaFleur, Corey Anderson, off the top of my head, it's escaping me for a moment at least, but those are the guys I was looking at as where your big money investments should have been. And, sorry, I was pulling up the bet pack here. That's where you should have been throwing your cash into, and they all came through. And again, I can't guarantee every time my gold bets are going to win, but it's just the way it is. It's just if you just bet based on my picks, you're not going to win all the time. But if you bet based on my betting information, you stand a better chance. Because there's fights I say, hey, look, I'm not interested in this matchup nearly as much as you think I am. So yeah, I had Frankie Edgar and Corey Anderson in a parlay. I had Justin Willis and Aljamain Sterling in a parlay, and then I had Ryan LaFleur in a silver pack, and he had some success in my wild card picks. So again, that's where you want to be putting your money. So if you're interested in betting, take a shot there. If you're doing well on your own, keep doing it. It doesn't matter how you're making money as long as you are making money and having success in this aspect of the game. That's a fairly long rant, and On that note, let's get to our first main card prediction. Fight number 1 on the main card takes place between two individuals who are longtime headliners and main eventers, former champions in the middleweight division. The number 9th ranked Vitor, the Phenom, Belfort, 26 wins, 13 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on Lyoto, the Dragon Machida, currently ranked 12th in the division with a record of 23 wins and 8 defeats. Now, this is possibly Belfort's retirement fight and or at least his last fight in the UFC, as he's hinted about walking away. His last fight was a victory over Nate Marquardt. He had lost 3 in a row and 4 of 5 if you recognize the no contest loss against Kelvin Gastelum for what it was or what it is. Now, Machida's coming off a split decision victory over Eric Anders, a fight I correctly predicted. He had lost 3 in a row and 4 of 5. Now, the first thing that jumps off the page when you look at these two individuals is the mounting number of knockout defeats that both have suffered. Vitor has been KO'd in 4 consecutive defeats, while Machida has lost back-to-back fights by knockout. So for guys who predominantly do most of the work on the feet, you see some concerning trends. Machida is 1 inch taller. They have the same reach, and Lyoto is the younger man by a year. Vitor has been out of action for almost a year, and both fighting in Brazil, where they're from. It should be interesting to see who gets the bigger pop. I would think Vitor will, but Machida will certainly have his supporters as well. Now, this is a very interesting style clash, whether they're fighting now or fighting back in their heyday. Vitor has been known for his violent bursts between prolonged periods of inactivity, where he looks to put guys down with that big power, and he takes his time between those attacks. For Machida, he's very well known for his elusive counter-based striking style. Based in karate, really gives guys headaches with his defensive abilities. Sit back, wait for his opponents to come in and attack, and then periodically dart in and fire back his own offense when the opportunity presents itself. Now, going back to Vitor, his last knockout victory came against Dan Henderson back in 2015. Only 4 fights have passed since, but it's concerning that a fighter that relies so much on knocking guys out hasn't been winning by knockout. In fact, he has 8 wins. He has 8 wins and 7 losses in fights that don't end via KO. And if you throw in his knockout defeats, he's 8 and 13 in those fights, which shows how crucial it is to his success to be knocking opponents out. And when you look at the fact that he beat Nate Marquardt by decision, a guy who's predominantly known for having a poor chin, only landing 37 strikes, and Nate landed 57, so that's very interesting there. That has to be a major concern for Vitor supporters. Now, Belfort also has cardio issues, and he's that one-and-done type fighter. He has a strong first round or even a strong couple early bursts, and then he just seems to fade, and getting older and having that long layoff is not going to make that better. Now, Machida, he's coming off an exceptionally gutsy performance. He took a lot of damage over 5 rounds, took some big shots versus a younger, stronger, possibly faster opponent, more durable opponent, what a lot of people thought, and snuck away the decision when some people felt he didn't do enough. But again, it was one of those fights where Machida he dug down and picked up a very good win. Still won the striking exchange in that fight by a ratio of 62 strikes for him, 32 for Anders. He has showed he might not be able to hang with the elite anymore, but he certainly can hold his own with the middle of the pack type fighters, guys who are looking to crack through. If he's considered a gatekeeper now, if he continues his career. Outside of the Brunson loss, though, when you look at Machida, the majority of his defeats have come on the floor. So it's that his chin's going, but it seems like that one position gets him in trouble. Yoel Romero took him down and stopped him on there. Luke Rockhold did some tremendous damage on the mat before submitting him, and then you go back to the Chris Weidman title fight. You took him down 5 times, and that's where he had a lot of his success in the decision victory. And I'm not saying you can't catch Machida on the feet. He certainly is hittable. Anders hit him on several occasions. Couldn't finish him. Did some damage. Did some noteworthy damage. But the big thing with Vitor Belfort is he is not known for taking guys down and beating him up on the mat. He's shown he can operate on the ground if need be. We go back to that armbar against John Jones, but again, it's not his forte. Vitor's avenue to victory here is a quick, violent knockout, probably inside the first round, maybe even sooner, inside the first couple of minutes. For Lyoto Machida, he has multiple avenues to win this fight. He can win by knockout in the first round against the Vitor Belfort fighter whose chin is definitely not what it used to be. He could also win by knockout later in the fight as Vitor slows down. Or there's also the possibility that they just go 3 rounds and Vitor doesn't land enough and Machida just outpoints him, frustrates him, and wins a decision. Vitor, simply put, for my money, doesn't offer enough offense to trouble Machida's defensive style. Look for Machida to counter him when he does come in. Machida might also get a little aggressive and push forward. He needs to avoid getting cracked and getting smashed by a big shot from Vitor. Again, Vitor appears to have deteriorated more than Machida, possibly suffering from the changes in the drug policies more than Lyoto Machida. And that long layoff for him is going to be extremely rough at this age. And my prediction is Lyoto Machida to defeat Vitor Belfort by knockout. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's bantamweight division as the 6th-ranked fighter, John Hands of Stone Lineker, 30 wins and 8 losses, takes on Brian Boom Kelleher, fighting in the United States with a record of 19 wins and 8 defeats. Now, Lineker has been on an absolute roll. His only loss in his last 8 fights came to the current champion, TJ Dillashaw. He is 5-1 with that Dillashaw loss since moving to 135 pounds. And he's got some big wins over guys like Michael McDonald and John Dodson. And, yeah, he's really done an impressive job since coming out from bantamweight. Now, for Boom Kelleher, he's 3-1 in the UFC, which is decent. He has noteworthy wins over a couple of Brazilians in Yuri Alcantara and former divisional champion Hein Barão. He beat Alcantara in Brazil, which is a good experience. He knows he can go into Brazil. He knows he can take on one of their fan favorites and defeat them. So he's been here, done that before. We'll see if he can keep it going. Physically, Kelleher 3 inches taller. We obviously know Lineker's a smaller man coming up from flyweight, but John Lineker will have a 1-inch reach advantage, and he is the younger man by 4 years. Now, Lineker's style is well known at this point. He has massive power. He has an excellent chin. He's much more technical than a lot of people give him credit for, and he has improved, but again, not unbreakable cardio, and he absolutely needs to stop the takedown. That's crucial. And the reason I say that is because the guys who have defeated him and made him look pedestrian at times have been wrestle-heavy fighters. TJ Dillashaw diffused his offense with 5 takedowns. Ali Bogatinov, you go back to his flyweight days, 6 takedowns to put him on the mat. Where when you look at his victories over his last 11 UFC wins, he's given up just 2 completions. That's an impressive ratio there, 11 wins with 2 takedowns. Now, John Lineker, again, he's known for his power, but the guy can put up some decent volume in his fights. 77 against Vera last time out, 93 against John Dodson over 5 rounds, 80 against Rob Font, and UFC best, again, taking place at flyweight, 133 significant strikes against Alpo Skiljic. So that's pretty impressive when you consider his power and the manner in which he throws his strikes to put up that type of volume. Now, as I said, his chin is so good. He knows he can wade forward. He can draw his opponent into a brawl. He cuts off the cage very well and really goes at them and forces them to fight his style of fight. He will attack the body with these vicious hooks, which can serve to slow his opponent down. They can also result in a stoppage. And at the very least, if some damage starts to pile up, they start to drop their hands, and then suddenly he's targeting the chin as well because there's not nearly as much defense in front of his face. Now, if his pressure forces his opponent to shoot, which is always something that can happen, like a panic wrestle, if you will, he has that nasty guillotine choke he can slap on. We've seen him put guys to sleep with it and finish fights, so that's something worth watching here. You know, Brian Kelleher, he's one of these guys who you're trying to get a read on him. He put together a very gritty performance against Barão. He got hit a lot, 116 significant strikes, but he wore out Henin and almost finished him. He probably would have finished him had he had a little bit of time left. So it was a solid performance. He did finish Damian Stasiak 1 fight prior, and ultimately Kelleher's shown his willingness to sit in the pocket and trade strikes and just say, I'm going to get the better of what you have to offer, and we're going to go with that. Unfortunately, that style of volume striking exposes himself to his opponents. And the question is, how many strikes can you take, and especially quantity of strikes can you take against John Lineker before he simply fucking wears you out? Now, Kelleher is a BJJ purple belt. He has 8 wins by submission. He submitted Yuri Alcantara, BJJ black belt. Some questions surrounding that fight. He hasn't showcased big takedown numbers in the UFC, and that certainly makes him less of a threat, at least based on what we've seen, to Lineker's takedown defense. We haven't seen him, shooting on guys and putting them on the mat, so we'll have to see if that transpires here. But ultimately, I don't see him threatening Lineker with the takedowns, and if he does, again, if he panic wrestles, he has to be careful. He's been submitted 5 times, just once by guillotine, but he seems to have issues with his submission defense, and if Lineker catches you, you're in serious trouble. Ultimately, in this fight, I think Lineker's power and chin combined with his own volume and his own level of volume that he throws forward, and the fact that he's fighting in Brazil will give him a massive edge in those categories. Unless Kelleher can grab a freak submission or has improved his wrestling and or striking defense significantly, he has limited ways to win this fight. His paths to victory are very small. I think ultimately, I keep saying that, I think Lineker's going to cut him off. They're going to trade. Eventually, he's going to land something huge, possibly to the body. I really like when he rips that body with those hooks. And my prediction is John Lineker to defeat Brian Kelleher by TKO. The third fight on the main card takes place in the women's strawweight division as highly touted prospect Mackenzie Dern, undefeated at 6-0, takes on ABC Amanda Cooper, currently holding a record of 4 wins and 3 defeats. Now, Dern is coming off a split decision win over Ashley Yoder in her debut, a fight I made some money on because everybody thought Yoder or Dern would come in and submit her, and I said no, take her by decision. There's some cash to be made there, and certainly she did. She landed just a single takedown in that matchup, and she has then gone on the record in the media and said she is looking to showcase her grappling skills against Cooper. She is looking for the submission. Now, Amanda Cooper coming off probably her best performance to date inside the octagon, defeating Angela Magana by TKO. She is 2-2 in the UFC, being submitted in both of her losses by Cynthia Calvillo and Suarez. Her name's escaping me. Physically, Dern 1 inch taller, Cooper will have a 1 inch reach advantage, and Mackenzie is the younger fighter by 2 years. Now, Dern is a big name. She's got a big following, the UFC, and she's fighting in Brazil, a place that she, her second home, first home, whatever you want to call it. Either way, she's very well liked there and likes fighting there. And the UFC wants to develop this young, talented woman and build her into something to help promote the division. She's also very early in her MMA career, and that's worth noting. So the UFC wants to bring her along slowly and not see her suffer setbacks. And of course, everybody looks at Ronda Rousey. She came along and she was beating big-name fighters, and all of a sudden, boom, shit hit the fan, and she fell apart, and that was the end of it. And I had this discussion with a friend of mine a couple of times, and it's just disappointing to see how she went. So the question you have to look at is Amanda Cooper being handpicked for her? That's a great question. All 3 of her pro losses have been by submission, including 2 in the UFC. She has landed 3 takedowns in her 2 wins, meaning she relies on going to the mat periodically, and she's given up 4 takedowns in her 2 UFC losses, so she can be taken down. Dern's striking is still a major work in progress, and that's what we want to focus on here first. She has some power. She offered some decent volume. She stays active, but she's still very, very clunky. I'm not a huge fan of her movement. It's awkward. It's clunky. It seems like there's an extra hitch in her offense, and she's got some body motion she just needs to eliminate that I think it could actually impact her cardio if she gets in a fight against an opponent who can push back and make her work hard. We could see her slow down. I just don't like the way she strikes. I want to see her tighten that up, but again, as long as she's doing what she's doing and focuses on her grappling, I think she's better off. The striking will come. Her wrestling is also a bit of a concern. She can drag opponents to the mat, and she only needs one opportunity to do so, but she's not one of these big wrestlers who's going to blast through the power double and easily put them down. So again, if you can put up some resistance, that could create some issues. In her recent fights, it's either been her willingness to focus solely on her striking, or simply her struggles to close the distance instead of her wrestling that have cost her, have limited her takedown attempts and made her go longer fights. We've seen a couple matchups where she goes deep into fights and then boom, slaps on a submission at the end. I've done what I needed to do, and here I'm going to finish it. Now, for Amanda Cooper, she's gritty. She wants to push forward and engage. I like her as a fighter, and she needs to push Dern, make her work hard. Don't expose herself to getting taken down or put on the mat, but still be in her face. Don't let her feel comfortable. Make her question why she's there, and make her start to, once you start to tire a fighter out, any skill sets that aren't tight and aren't good and aren't, built into the body already with that muscle memory, they're going to start to become even more clunky and even more of a liability. I think Cooper has an edge on the feet. Whether she can keep it there or not is a big question. Additionally, can she be successful without landing those periodic takedowns? Again, I believe she finished Magana on the mat. I could be wrong on that one. I know I researched it, but I forgot to write that down. But I believe she finished her on the ground with some ground and pound. If she can't land takedowns against Mackenzie Dern, is she going to win this fight solely on her striking? I still think with Dern's lack of striking skill, she absolutely could. She needs to keep it standing, though, and keep engaging. Again, wear her out. But I think Cooper's just too inclined to going to the mat in both her victories and defeats to suggest that she won't be taken down. This fight won't hit the mat at some point. Dern fighting at home in Brazil is a huge coup as well. I think it really pushes her. I think only 7 pro fights is a lot for Cooper to be dealing with in a matchup. I think eventually this fight hits the ground, probably via the clinch, and Dern will eventually get her grappling engaged. I would almost say Cooper is an easier fight than Ashley Yoder. I really like Yoder as well. I like Cooper, but I like Yoder as well. My prediction is Mackenzie Dern to defeat Ashley Cooper. Sorry. Wow, that sounds good. Amanda Cooper. It's an A. Amanda Cooper by submission. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's middleweight division as former Strikeforce champion, number 2 ranked Ronaldo Jacare Souza, 25 wins, 5 losses, and 1 no contest, takes an Ultimate Fighter winner, and former welterweight, number 5 ranked Kelvin Gastelum, currently holding a record of 15 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Souza's trying to secure a title shot. He's long deserved of one. He could get there with a victory. He's 11-2 over his last 13 fights, with losses to Yoel Romero and the current champion Robert Whittaker, the 2 guys who are fighting for the title next. That's impressive. It's hard to believe he hasn't garnered a title shot with that type of run, and he is 4-0 in fighting at home in Brazil, so that's also something big. For Gastelum, he's got some decent wins. He's got wins over Tim Kennedy and Michael Bisping. He had that no contest win in Brazil, which he really was disappointed in, where he knocked out Vitor Belfort, and his lone loss to former champion Chris Weidman. And so he's had a pretty good run. He's fought top-level guys in the division since coming over. Jacare 6'1", he'll be 4 inches taller than Gastelum. He'll have a 1-inch reach advantage. Gastelum is the younger man by 12 years. Now, the first big question when we look at Kelvin Gastelum fighting at middleweight is the size going to be a factor here? He looked very small against Chris Weidman, despite the fact he floored him and knocked him to the mat. A lot of people felt that Weidman was just too big, kept him on the ground, eventually finished him, and there was not much Kelvin Gastelum could do because of how big Weidman is. Now, when you look at Weidman, he's 6'2", and that's only an inch. He's only an inch taller than Jacare. But one big thing is he has a 7-inch reach advantage, which made it difficult for Kelvin to get in on the inside with consistency. And he used that wrestling to ground Kelvin once he decided to come forward. When you look at Jacare, what he's done, he struggled against a guy in Robert Whittaker because Whittaker was way too quick for him, and Whittaker is a former welterweight. He's not a big man by any stretch of the imagination. He's bigger than Kelvin, at least height-wise and reach-wise. But Jacare struggled tremendously with his speed, and he was able to shut down the wrestling and grappling of Souza because of it, hurt him, and finished him. He actually put a beating on him enough that people started to question, is Jacare finished? Which he could be, but he's at least erased that for now. Jacare looked much better against Derek Brunson, a guy who's quick, but not nearly as elusive and didn't fight nearly as smart a strategic fight as Whittaker did. And again, it raises those questions. Was it a return to form for Jacare, or was a solid stylistic matchup against a guy he's already beat once and had a mental edge as well over top of Brunson? Can Souza replicate Weidman's success with takedowns? That's a big question, leading to either a submission or decision victory. Kelvin was taken down 7 times by Chris. He was taken down 3 times by Tim Kennedy. Neil Magny back at welterweight took him down 6 times. He can be put on the mat. But Jacare hasn't put up big takedown numbers. He had 4 against Mousasi back in the day, but most of his fights involve single takedowns, and obviously he's capable of finishing once he gets on the floor. He usually only needs one, but he's not a guy who's going to chain wrestle and put you down 4, 5, 6 times and beat you up, and he looks to finish you once he gets you on the ground. And he's pretty much capable of finishing anybody he can put on the mat. Now, as far as setting up his takedowns, he likes to strike and change levels. Big question is, can he close the gap against Kelvin and get those takedowns? Get into range, throw the strikes, and then boom, blast that double. He gets a little aggressive. He throws himself into takedowns and sometimes telegraphs them and allows his opponents to slide out of range. Jacare has a clear advantage once he hits the mat. Weidman showed that Gastelum can be kept down and eventually finish on the floor, so that's what Jacare wants to do. Now, for Gastelum, can he mimic the success of Robert Whittaker? He has the speed, and I would say he's right on par. He's right there with the power as well. He took out Michael Bisping and Vitor Belfort, 2 guys with questionable chins, but he showed that hand speed. He really did damage to them. He's not an overwhelming volume striker, but I think he has the edge on Jacare in speed and technique and the ability to take a punch as well. I think he's got a better chin. Gastelum needs to stick and move, land his strikes, keep Jacare from closing that gap, and just look for that opening to blast away. I think we've seen guys in the past, Whittaker and Romero, use athleticism to avoid what Jacare had. A lot of the guys Jacare has beaten in the past have been a little bit slower fighters that he was able to catch up to and put on the mat. I think this is a great opportunity for Kelvin Gastelum, and I think he's going to pull it off in Brazil. Souza opens himself up way too much when he strikes. I think Kelvin's going to catch him. Southpaw also, where Kelvin will give him an edge in striking and also make some of those takedown opportunities for Jacare a little bit tougher to acquire. And my prediction is Kelvin Gastelum to defeat Jacare Souza by TKO. We move now to the main event of the evening, and it takes place in the women's bantamweight division as the champion, Amanda the Lioness Nunes, 15 wins and 4 losses, puts her title on the line against the number 2 ranked fighter in the division, Raquel Rocky Pennington, currently coming with a record of 9 wins and 6 defeats. Now, Nunes is putting together an impressive run. There's no denying that. Defeating Sarah McMahon, Valentina Shevchenko twice, Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, of course, finishing those girls, including 2 title defenses, one against Shevchenko most recently and against Rousey prior to that. Her run's been very impressive. For Pennington, she's won 4 consecutive bouts, including avenging a rematch against Jessica Andrade. I correctly predicted Andrade in the first one and Pennington in the second one. Don't tell me how I did that. She had a split versus Betchko Hayda, and then the upset win, which I correctly predicted, against Miesha Tate. She hasn't fought in 18 months coming into this matchup, which absolutely is a concern. The champion is 1 inch taller, she'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and Nunes is actually just a couple months older than Pennington, so they're pretty much the same age. Now, the first thing you look at in this fight is Nunes' cardio. We talk about this a lot, and you have to wonder at what point has she proven it's no longer an issue. It appears she's got it under control. She's coming off a 5-round split decision victory and a 3-round decision win of both over Valentina Shevchenko. Now, the big question is it because Nunes has improved her cardio, or is it based on Shevchenko's style and how it matches up with Amanda and allows her to fight her own fight at her own pace and conserve that cardio? In other fights, excluding those 3, she is 0-3 in fights to go beyond the opening round. So it tells you there's still issues there. At least there were at that time period. Maybe she's cleaned them up. Now, Pennington's run, well, I did say she's put together some nice wins. It hasn't been an overwhelming run of opponents. Like, she's fought Holly Holm and lost to her. She actually has one in her current 4-fight winning streak. She only has one victory over a fighter that's active within the division, and that was that split decision win against Betch Koheda. Elizabeth Phillips has been released. Obviously, Jessica Andrade is fighting below in the strawweight division, and Miesha Tate has since retired. So that takes a little bit of the steam off of what she's accomplished recently. Now, she's like I kind of refer to her as a grinding striker. She's not. She can work on the inside, but she just kind of sits there and picks away at her opponents. She's not going to land that one-punch KO. She only has one career win by knockout. She does have a couple submissions on her record. We'll talk about that in a bit. But she keeps active for the most part, close range, and just keeps working away. Nothing profound, nothing overwhelming, but still, right there. Against Betch Koheda, she landed 75 significant strikes, but in her fights prior to that went the distance, she averaged 38 significant strikes per fight. And that's not... I don't think it's good enough to win a championship fight, I don't think. And she's never gone 5 rounds as well, which is worth noting how she's going to hold up in rounds 4 and 5. And overall, her record in decisions, not great. 5 wins, 4 losses, including a 1-2 record in fights that go to a split decision, which tells us her style is not impressing the judges to the point where they feel she's a clear-cut winner in a lot of matchups. Now, she isn't a huge takedown threat as well. She did land 3 against Elizabeth Phillips, but on the flip side, Jessica Andrade landed 7 over 2 fights. Tate did go 1 for 5, so defensively she's not terrible. She has a decent submission game, but again, I don't anticipate her catching Amanda Nunes in a submission unless Nunes exhausts herself. Now, Nunes, we've always known her to be a very good starter. She dominated Kat Zingano early in that fight. She finished Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate, and Sarah McMahon all early in those bouts, so she's a very good starter. The question starts to arise about her, as we said, is when she gets beyond round 2. Will she start to slow down? But again, against Shevchenko, she looked very good, very measured, very paced, but still very effective. She throws hard strikes. She's got good punching power. She picks her spots very effectively, and that really has probably been the key. When you look at the other scenarios, when you go to her fight against Kat Zingano, and you go all the way back to her Strikeforce fight against Alexis Davis, got off the fantastic starts, was dominant, and then boom, went for the finish, washed out, and was defeated in both those matchups. It's almost like if she doesn't finish, if she's an opportunity, she has to make that decision. Do I go for it and go all in and get it, or do I risk possibly getting stopped myself by gassing out? And she hasn't been posed with that situation in a little bit, or at least hasn't wound up in the situation as she's finished anyone she's hurt. Now, I would say in the striking comparison against Pennington, Pennington's a boxer primarily. I would say Nunes with her kicks is the more diversified striker. And she's got more power, and she's a little more urgent and throws a little bit more volume, which are all positives. And then when you add to the fact she's fighting in Brazil, those are all big check marks for her. When she fought Valentina Shevchenko twice, she fought a much better striker. And against Shevchenko, that was the fight she slowed down in the first matchup in the round 3 and nearly got stopped. She got stunned a little bit with a knee shot there. She fought a better striker and had success, but she also landed takedowns. She landed 4 takedowns over those 2 fights. And while she still had success on the feet, she incorporated those, and we could very much see her do that here. It could be an option against Pennington to get on top, to grind it out, to land ground and pound, to look for a possible submission finish. Ultimately, Pennington doesn't offer the volume needed to push or outwork Nunes, to exhaust her or simply get the better of her on the card. She doesn't have the power to finish her, and quite honestly, I don't think, unless she gasses, I don't see her getting the submission either, as I don't think she'll be able to take her down. Again, I say all these things with a big asterisk if Nunes' cardio holds up. The layoff and location are 2 major concerns for Pennington. The break could lead to some improvements, but it could lead to ring rust and allow Nunes to get off to one of those sparkling, strong starts and never look back. Ultimately, and I say ultimately a lot, I hate that, look for Nunes to be the more dynamic striker, land the better shots, score a few timely takedowns, and really edge out a fight that I don't know how awesome it's going to be. I look forward to it, but I don't see it being amazing with their styles, but the judges will give it to her. So my prediction is Amanda Nunes to defeat Raquel Pennington by decision. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 224. I'm looking forward to the card. It's been a little while since we've had a pay-per-view, so I can't wait to get things going. All preliminary picks, and I believe there are 8 preliminary fights. Will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. The bet packs will also be there in the bet shop, $15. Full card breakdown coming off a very profitable showing. And we've had a very profitable 2018 so far with a couple hiccups, which is always going to happen. Again, if you're winning, keep doing what you're doing. If you're not, you want to take some of my information and see what you can do. Again, don't expect you buy once, we're going to win once. If you do, that's great. But it's the grind. It's get in there, hold on, and see, and you'll see things start to pour in. As always, I appreciate everybody tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. You can check me out on YouTube and follow me on Facebook as well. You'll just search KamikazeOverdrive.net. And yeah, we got a couple fights cards in a row. It looks like it'll be a very fun next couple of months. So let's get cracking. I'll see you right back here after the bell. Take care, guys. Hi.